Alan, tonight you're wearing two hats. You're here as the Premier of the Western Cape. The City of Cape Town and the province have been firm supporters and funders of the EDP over these past 10 years. I'd like to ask you, Alan, why did you think the Western Cape needed something different? You know, there were many other organizations at the time. So what was it that kind of put the sparkle in your eye, around partnering or partnerships?
I'd seen and witnessed the work that had been done in the Cape Town Partnership, and it was amazing to see how government and private sector could come together and do amazing things. And I'd just been given this job of treasury and finance on the one side, but the economic opportunities or economic development in those days on the other side. And so I was applying my mind to our ecosystem of the economy. And there's one thing that was a big problem then. I'm going to tell you right now it's still a big problem, and that's called organized business. It's a real oxymoron. And so you had business on the one side, and they were really fragmented. And I mean, it's difficult to get business to get all into one space. And government, and get business and government to really speak to each other. And then, of course, I think the real thing with the spheres of government, who really were, miles apart from each other. We'd also just taken over, so it was a political change at the province. We had a sort of coalition at the city which had formed a majority government, but it wasn't an easy ecosystem and an easy environment. So it was about that. It was about this divided system. And we really had to find ways in which we could collaborate, we could work together. And that was the idea, and that was where it started.
So Alan, 10 years on, what are the big challenges that the Western Cape government is facing that requires collaboration, and specifically the role of an intermediary like the EDP? What does it bring to the table?
So I think that you always need a convener, right? You always need a convener, especially when there's fractious partnerships, because you don't get together ordinarily around a table or even pick up the phone to talk to each other. So whether it was a drought or an agricultural protest and a divisive agricultural system with farm worker strikes, whether it was feeding people, as you said, every time there was a crisis, the day zero crisis, there was Andrew and there was this team at the EDP just pulling all the players together, playing that catalytic role. I've got no doubt that partnerships work. If you can get the collaboration to work, you make massive differences.
Geordin, I spoke earlier about the challenges facing the city, and I wanted to hear from you how you think collaborative approach will help the city, both collaborating with other spheres of government, with citizens, with the private sector, with academia, all represented here tonight. How's that going to help us right now and in the future?
Firstly, I think there's far too much of thinking that government has all the answers and always the best answer. And very often that's not the case. So I think you've got to try to engender a culture or an attitude of humility that starts with figuring out where you can get the best answer. And having an attitude in policy making and in government that says part of our role is not starting off with having the best answer, but saying who are the partners that we can go to, what are the connections that we can make to make sure we end up with the best answer. And then finally, I would just say the problems are so difficult that you would be crazy to argue that government alone could solve it. These things are extremely complex, whether it be what Andrew was mentioning about trying to clean up Cape Town's water ecosystems, cleaning up the city itself, the housing space, incredibly complex and divisive. There's no way that you can approach those problems thinking that you've got a monopoly on the truth or a monopoly on good ideas. If you approach those problems with that attitude, you're on a hiding to nothing.
Yes. What is the role of leadership when you're looking at collaborative problem solving? Both of your own and then also from other sectors like the private sector.
most of what I try to do every day is about organizational culture. We've got 33,000 staff members, and so I try to spend a lot of time with our senior management and middle management in the organization, just constantly reinforcing the kind of culture change that I just spoke about in the earlier answer, to say we can't solve these problems alone. We've got to think outside of the box and go outside of the organization to look for better answers and better evidence and the best policy. That we've got to have an attitude of humility. That's always really interesting to me. Is what's going in at the top, is it actually generating the culture change that we need? And I think so much of what we can do together is actually just that, focus relentlessly on values and culture.
So, Lebo, what do you say about that answer? What has been your experience as the Chief Culture Officer? And comment a bit about understanding the role of leadership, the culture of an organization. What does it look like?
So leadership for me is number one. I think that role modeling, having leaders in an organization that not only just kind of like say, but also do, and who can really just emulate what they're talking about. So people, I mean, there's so many buzzwords also. People who can walk the talk, they say, and so I think that's important. Then there's an issue of rituals. I think it's like about like the things that you do on a regular basis. Just thinking about this idea of informality in government spaces and everyone addressing each other first names. I mean, I feel like things like that take practice and take quite a while. But I think that if I look at Harambee, I think there's like a certain philosophy that we just started with from day one, where we knew that it takes a village to solve youth unemployment. It takes more than one entity to do so. No one entity can solve a big issue such as youth unemployment by themselves. Is core to how you come at the problem, and so we've got a saying that do not fall in don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem, because I think that there aren't single truths in this game, and I think that there aren't single smart ideas.
Andrew, what solution have you fallen out of love with?
Well, it's interesting. When we started the EDP, the idea was to get everyone in the Western Cape economy together in a single partnership for the Western Cape economy. We had 130 members, and it took us about 6 months to realize that it didn't work, that we'd been going down the wrong road. Because what we learned quite quickly is that there are so many different interests and competing interests in the system that one partnering solution didn't fit everyone, in business, in government, different spheres of government, and certainly in civil society and communities. But it means that you've got to learn by doing and change if something's not working. And the idea of a single partnership for the whole region didn't work. And so what we learned out of that is one of our lessons is focus on partnering solutions in a more discrete and less abstract way, and go down to where the problem is, and it's either an area-based partnering solution at different scales or an issue-based partnering solution around different themes like water or energy or waste or safety or whatever it is. And that became far more effective.